I recognise quite a few faces from the last time. I want to congratulate you. The last time you were here, you were very well behaved, and I hope it's going to carry on like that. Please remember you are here to observe, not to join in, and treat each other with respect. Thank you very much. Please be seated, everybody. Here we go. There we go. The usual struggle to find. Right. So we move straight away to apologies for absence. Are there any apologies anymore? Yes, sorry, Councillor Collins. Oh yes, we've got apologies from Councillor Cat Eccles and Councillor Cash Khan. Declarations of interest. Any prior declarations of interest made under the Members' Code of Conduct have been published online. I now invite members to declare any additional interest they may have. Thank you, colleagues. I move that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 15th of July, the extraordinary meetings held on the 22nd of August and the 25th of September 2024 be confirmed as correct records and signed. Does the Council agree? That is carried. We are now moving into the petition. I move that in accordance with Council Procedure 13C, the order of business be changed to enable the debate on the parking charges petition to be considered as the next item. Do we agree? Thank you. That is carried. Under the provisions of the petition scheme, a petitioner for debate has been received containing over 3,000 signatures. Can I welcome Mr. Salim to the meeting? On behalf of the petition organisers, Mr. Salim now has the opportunity to address the Council for a maximum of 3 minutes. Mr. Salim.
Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I'm here representing thousands of residents who are united together in signing a petition against the imposed parking charges. Now, normally as part of my introduction, I would thank you for this opportunity, but I'm finding it difficult to impart any gratitude as I too share the same opinions of our community and cannot hide our deep disappointment with the decision this Council has made. When we initially presented this petition in September, over 6,000 residents had signed it. Today, that number stands at 11,739, and hundreds of businesses also have written in urgently asking the Council to amend their decision. We voted for you to be our eyes and ears, to be our voice in this chamber, and to act in a way that will be positive for us all. But you have failed us. Where was the consultation before such a decision was made? In August, when you rushed this through, only 2 councillors spoke up for the people of our communities. Just 2 out of 72. Local towns in the borough were already struggling due to a decrease in footfall. A business that has been a half-house zone for 144 years is now closing. In Kings Winford, 20 days on, businesses have been forced to reimburse parking tickets as an incentive for people to shop in the village. Residents often ask, how did we get here? Could it be spending over £24 million on our leisure centres, and then adding parking charges and a fear of outsourcing resulting in hundreds of cancelled memberships, or spending millions on consultants, a dodgy member champion payout, loss of the Brooks Bar, £35,000 worth of IT equipment lost, giving yourself a pay rise? Man, I could go on forever. Your own audit report demands you pause the Pens Meadow School project. Holding on to that will give us an immediate saving of £16 million. But it appears you want our residents to clean up your failures, yet you won't even consult with us. The reality is you don't need to waste millions on consultants. Just speak to your residents and businesses. It won't cost a thing. The borough parking strategy estimated a 50% drop in parking tickets. There is no impasse, so there are no measures put in place to protect our businesses. Unfortunately, Residents of this borough have come to accept that a 2-hour free parking may no longer be possible. However, amending phase 1 is within your power, and on behalf of the residents, we propose the following. We ask the first hour either be free or start at 50 pence, second hour to be £1, scrapping of phase 2 of on-street parking and holding a proper consultation, giving residents opportunity to voice their opinions. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been asked to deliver a clear message from thousands of our residents and hundreds of our traders. It's simple. Let's stop this farce. Let's take ownership. Let's move forward unified as one community. Now, the leader was quoted in the press saying that no one will die from paying parking charges, but our businesses will. Our town centres will, and ultimately it will kill any faith that our residents have in our local politicians. We need to reverse this growing feeling of distrust, and we can start today by reversing these badly thought out parking positions. And if you don't believe me, then just take a look up there and listen.
Thank you, Mr. Salim. Can I just remind you, you may feel like clapping and you think it's great, but actually it's words in this council chamber that count. So please, no more of that. The matter is now open for debate by members of the council. I call on Councillor Damien Caulfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, my predecessor, Shaz Salim, when he was Cabinet Member, signed the decision sheet to increase car parking charges. He himself wanted to scrap the 2 hours free car parking. So for him to deliver this petition here tonight contradicts the very reason he's encouraged residents to be here tonight. And I'm more than happy to make that decision sheet available that he signed for all to see. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
No, I'm not having that. I'm sorry. One more interruption and I will stand. You will all be removed. And that is not my threat. That's me telling you. That's what will happen next time. Bit of respect, please. I call on Councillor Bex Collins.
Public Finance and Accountability, or SIPFA, if you prefer the acronym. Rightly, we were instructed to introduce parking charges, an action not taken lightly. I do believe Councillor Lowe was heard to ask why we hadn't introduced car parking charges 12 months ago in the LGA Improvement Board. We must understand this decision wasn't merely about generating revenue, it was about maintaining our autonomy as a council. Had we chosen to ignore this directive, we would have risked being placed under the control of commissioners, a scenario that could severely compromise our ability to govern efficiently and respond to the needs of our residents. Let us consider what this would mean for our communities. Being managed by external commissioners would likely lead to drastic measures, including the potential for significant increases in council tax, mirroring the situation faced by our neighbours in Birmingham. Now, I am compelled to address the expectations raised by Shaz Salim and the residents he has brought to this meeting today. It's clear that there is a desire for policy change, a yearning for alternatives to what has already been agreed across this chamber. However, I must be very frank. The realities of our financial situation dictate that such changes are not remotely possible at this time. While we appreciate the passion and concerns of our residents, we must adhere to the advice from our financial experts and the directives that have been set forth to ensure we remain in control of our own governance. We're carrying out the recommendations from the LGA, the independent auditors and SIPFA, and we must recognise that our decisions today are pivotal in safeguarding the autonomy of our council and, by extension, our community. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. I call on Councillor Shaukat Ali.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll start off with a question. How did the Conservative administration and this council end up in this position? The answer, Madam Mayor, is quite simple. Financial mismanagement. Because of their poor decisions, local people are now bearing the brunt of the consequences. At the council meeting on the 15th of July, I raised on behalf of our group about concerns about the proposed car parking charges and their potential impact on already struggling businesses. I specifically asked the leader of the council to confirm whether thorough modelling had been done to explore various options, assess their effects, and ensure that every possible measure had been taken to minimise the impact of introducing these charges. Madam Mayor, the leader chose not to directly answer the question, sidestepping the issue entirely. On the 14th of August, my colleague, Councillor Cathy Bayton, and I attended a meeting of the Dudley Town Centre Partnership, where more than 50 people were present. They told us they had not been consulted by the council about the parking charges and were already struggling to survive. They shared how Dudley Town feels like a construction site, with many businesses closing and under pressure. We were not surprised by their concerns. The Conservative administration simply does not listen. Similarly, people using leisure centres have asked for parking passes so they aren't paying more to go to a private gym, but their concerns have also been ignored. On the 22nd of August, my colleague, Councillor Cathy Bayton, raised the very issues on behalf of the traders and the businesses in this chamber. Again, she was ignored. Madam Mayor, traders, businesses and retailers are the heartbeat of our town and villages, contributing to economic prosperity. Their views should not be dismissed on a whim, but the Conservative administration has failed them, and this cannot continue time and again. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ali. I now call on Councillor Sean Kesey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So here we are, Dudley Metropolitan Borough in 2024. The borough, it appears, doing everything possible to damage and degrade the lives and futures of residents and businesses within its boundaries. And let's call it what it really is, a disaster, a Conservative disaster. For they, the Conservative Party and its councillors in Dudley, Stourbridge and Hales Owen, are the reason why Dudley Council has been criticised by auditors, lampooned in the press and caused over 6,000 worried residents to sign a petition in order for one of their concerns, car parking charges, to be debated here tonight. It's not just car parking charges, it's our leisure centres, our libraries, our green bin collections, our weekly grey bin collections, the state of our roads, the weeds everywhere, the sudden loss of the chief executive, the sudden loss of the Section 151 officer, yes, the person who makes recommendations on finance for councillors Harley and Clark to ignore, to take on board, the £1.5 million wasted on Brooks Bar that taxpayers will be funding for the next 30 years. The list goes on. If Dudley Metropolitan Borough Council were a private business, its leader and its leadership would be gone. But it isn't. Dudley's a taxpayer-funded local authority that has been sailed up the proverbial creek, and now the people that have sailed it up there, unbelievably, are the ones tasked with trying to rescue it. And how are they doing that? By, it appears to me, taking everyone down with them. The current economic climate for small retail and hospitality is dire. The amount of money in people's pockets appears less and less. Many small business owners barely make enough to support themselves. Many have given up, leaving a dream behind, sometimes losing everything they have. And to add to that misery, Dudley's Conservative leadership uses this moment to introduce parking charges, a tax. Yes, that's what it is, a tax on people who drive into our town centres to support local retail. A tax that may cause people to resort to online purchasing or probably guarantee that a daily trip to town may become a weekly trip. We've already in the press seen evidence of retail owners simply calling it a day. And now here's the big one, the obvious question. How much consultation was done with the very businesses this car parking tax will damage? It will surely have been a lengthy and in-depth consultation encompassing an eclectic range of businesses around the borough. Well, no, it appears none, nothing, zero. The introduction of parking charges is, in my opinion, a mean and cruel attack on local businesses and simply one of the negative measures being introduced to bail out a failing Conservative leadership who over the past 18 months have lost control of Dudley's finances. The Chief Executive, Kevin O'Keefe, gone. The Section 151 officer, Ian Newman, gone. There's only one point of that leadership triangle left, Councillor Harley, and you should be gone too. Shame on the Conservative group for allowing this to happen. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kesey. I do think it's advisable that we do not name officers who work for the council. I call on Councillor Cathy Bayton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And again, I rise to speak on behalf of the traders of the borough, well, traders of Dudley Town Centre, and read out a standard statement that they have sent to me. So I want to take this opportunity to reinforce traders' comments made to the extraordinary meeting concerning car parking. We always knew there was going to be a problem, but we as traders were never consulted at all before this was passed. So I think Councillor Kesey, that's your answer. On the 1st of October, I have further comments to make. My takings in the first week were down by a third. I have been trading in Dudley for the past 30 years and I've never seen or heard such disappointment and disgruntlement from our customers, your residents. Some customers are actually saying au revoir. They state they won't be coming again as the parking is too much and they are not prepared to pay it. Tier 1 car park in Tower Street is the nearest car park for the market and shops in the town centre, and that's £1.80 an hour, which has already lost half of its parking spaces due to the porter cabins for the drivers' restrooms. The cheaper parking for Tier 2 and 3 are further away, and they are much too far for the elderly and disabled to go with heavy shopping bags. Businesses are tied into lengthy leases, so it is not justifiable. How do they pay their rent with much lower income due to lack of footfall? If on-street parking comes into force, which again has been done with no consultation with traders, as was the car parking, I would like to ask the question, is this contract really worth the effort that will result in the running down of our once thriving historical town centre? Additionally, where can traders find the parking strategy for the borough? What is being done to increase the capacity with car parks in the borough? And as Shadow Cabinet Minister for Climate Change, I do support a structured and strategic move away from private vehicles, but it can't be done until we have an integrated, reliable transport service, and we do not have that. We are nowhere near it in Dudley. Not until we have the metro completed, the interchange and ultimately bus franchising. Those are the things that will make the difference to us. So not only are you charging an extortionate amount leading to significant loss of footfall, additional car parking is also to be removed as part of Stafford Street car park, which will be given to Eton / Star Academies for their sixth form. And we only have half of Tower Street available up until completion of the interchange. It feels like the administration are hell-bent on destroying Dudley as a town. On-street charges would just be the final nail in the coffin for traders. This needs a very serious rethink with proper consultation with traders and residents in order to save Dudley Town Centre.
Thank you, Councillor Bayton. I now call on Councillor Simon Phipps.
Firstly, I'd like to respond to several points that have been put forward in the debate. Firstly, Councillor Ali, you mentioned in your speech with regard to what you felt are the reasons why parking charges have been introduced. And I'll respond to that later, but I will point out that the fake outrage that is being proposed by members on your benches is totally against the fact that not a single member in this chamber voted against the report that did introduce the parking charges, because I do believe that everyone in this chamber understands the financial issues that the council faces and the reasons why it's having to be done. So it's all well and good to criticise it now, but you weren't criticising at that point and you certainly did not vote against it. Councillor Baton, only a minor point, I would say that you did mention about, it might have been in the traders' response, elderly and disabled people being unable to carry the bags to the car parks. They should still receive free parking with a blue badge. So anybody that is out there that has a blue badge should still be able to park for free in our car parks. That is in the policy, and I just want to make sure that's clear. Finally, Councillor Kesey, I do find it extremely hypocritical, I'm afraid to say, because several years ago in Cabinet, not only did you propose that we introduce car parking charges in Cabinet budget summits, that can be backed up by other people on this front bench, but also can be backed up by former Cabinet members who I spoke to at the time, and I was certainly against them at that point, and my colleagues were. There was a split in the Cabinet. Some people were considering it. I never did at that point, but you were heavily in favour of it. And you also, I remember having the briefings with you and members of the commercial team putting forward the increases to charges at places like Himley Hall. So you were putting that forward back in 2022. And I know that's not the reason why you've all come here, but I think it's really important that we actually establish some facts here with regard to the actual positions that some people in this chamber are taking, which I think are disingenuous slightly. I want to move on to the actual petition very briefly to mention one point. The petition submitted to us says that external auditors should be invited to review the council accounts and see how the finances are being managed. That is done on a yearly basis. Dudley is one of actually quite a few councils that has its accounts signed off every year. There's lots and lots of councils that don't even have their accounts signed off properly. Dudley is one of the few that does. And they have been saying for years that the council is not maximising its income opportunities, and that is a risk. And that is why people in this chamber, particularly on the Labour group, have been raising things like car parking charges for quite a lot longer than the last few weeks or few months that we've been having this debate, because auditors have consistently marked things like that as a way that the council should be looking to raise funds, much like every other council in the West Midlands does, and the vast majority of councils across the country do. And I don't like the fact, I don't think anybody on these benches certainly like the fact that we've had to put car parking charges in and decided to take that decision. Nobody has, but nobody in this debate, and in the short amount of time I've got left, I'll try and say it, has explained what free parking actually is. It was alleged that it was a tax. It's not a tax, because parking is not free to provide. Those spaces are not free to exist. It costs money to provide them, to maintain them. It costs money to enforce them. And for years, the council has done a very bad job on things like enforcement. The additional income that's coming in and the fact that we have charges means that we can get extra enforcement officers that actually can do a job of patrolling in the car parks, but also patrolling around schools. In my ward, Halsowen College, we couldn't get a parking enforcement officer up there for love nor money, but the fact that there's extra investment in that area now means that I can get some proper enforcement on a dangerous road that really does need something done there. And why has this had to come about now? Because you'll know the Conservative Party, in conjunction with the third party at that time, introduced free parking in 2017. It wasn't free before then. We had to pay for the first 2 hours before 2017, but we kept it free throughout all those years because we wanted to do the right thing by businesses and traders in the town centres. We kept that going far beyond what the warnings were saying with regards to you need to improve your income. So we have tried to do things the right way on these benches. Unfortunately, we've run out of room. And the reason for that is adult social care and children's services.
And unfortunately, you have run out of time. Thank you, Councillor
Madam Mayor.
Phipps. I call on Councillor Ryan Priest.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't rise to speak on the merits or pitfalls of parking charges. I think colleagues around the room have done that eloquently enough. I rise because actually I'm furious with the way that traders have been treated throughout this process. I don't doubt that the council's met its legal obligation to consult, but it has failed in its moral obligation. Traders in our town centres, particularly the Halsowen bid, should have been involved in this process. Their concerns should have been listened to from the beginning. Now, I was more than happy to attend a meeting in Halesowen to speak with traders about this last month. To my knowledge, all Halesowen-based councillors were invited. I represented the Liberal Democrat group. I was pleased to see Councillor Hill there too, but nobody else showed up. That was the only engagement this authority has had with traders, and it came after the decision was made. So I'm tired of hearing councillors in this chamber attempt to play both sides of this debate. I'm tired of hearing this authority claim to be a champion of small businesses but refuse to engage with them. And I'm particularly tired of hearing the borough's MPs bleat their opposition to the press when one of them could have voted against parking charges in this chamber but didn't even show up. It's not good enough. Now, there are lessons to be learned here as the authority draws up its plans for phase 2 of the parking strategy. I know there are difficult decisions to be made, but this authority should be empowering residents to have a real say in those decisions, not just inflicting cuts on them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Priest. I now call on Councillor Patrick Harley.
Mayor, why are we here having this debate today? Well, we're here having this debate, Madam Mayor, because of the rising cost of social care, both adults and children's. Adult social care in Dudley is predicting an overspend next year of more than £10 million. That has to be found from somewhere. The cost of a single child in social care for Dudley costs an average of £6,500 a week. A week. Have 10 of those, Madam Mayor, and you've not got much change out of £4 million a year. And we have far more than that. So we play the blame game. So who is to blame? And I'll be completely honest, non-political point. All the governments of the last 20 odd years are to blame because none of them have grasped the nettle that is social care. Shall I sit there, Madam?
I will talk over you so nobody will be able to hear. So call out as much as you like. No one will hear you because I will talk over you. I will talk over you. I will talk over you. Please, will you remove this gentleman? I will talk over you. You are not allowed to speak from the gallery. I'm going to stop the time now. I have to say that your behaviour is extremely poor. Don't shout at me. Thank you. If you want to speak to me privately.
Get a selfie, Shaz. Take a selfie.
If you wish to leave the meeting, now is the moment to go. All right, back to you, Councillor Harley.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, successive governments have just failed to grasp that nettle of social care. We have a cartel of private looked after children provision that absolutely screws councils over up and down the country. Now, we're hearing the right noises. This is where I don't make a political point. We're hearing the right noises from the new government, and that's in communications with one of the new MPs, Sonia Hume. I had a good chat with her last Friday. But we're also hearing the right noises. We won't hold our breath. We've all been here before over the last 20 years, and it's not changed, but it needs to. How do we resolve the issues that come from the cost of social care? Well, we introduce green waste charges. We reform the collection of waste. Bearing in mind, we've got an added £2 to £3 million cost of introducing food waste collection that we don't want to do. But the last government introduced it, and the new government, really, they're not going to stop it either. We have a reduced workforce, and we don't fill vacancies. We restructure officer and departmental teams. We propose a new total operating model. And yes, unfortunately, we scrapped the 2 hours free car parking. Now, what is the cost of not doing those measures and many, many more, Madam Mayor? Well, a 114 could be issued. Bankruptcy, a commissioner coming in, a commissioner that calls me into the office on a Monday morning, and the leader of the opposition, and the chief exec, and says, today, I'm going to tell you what you're going to stop doing, what you're going to cut, what you're going to sell off, which leisure centre, which library today you will close because you didn't make those tough decisions. That's the cost of not doing what we've done in September. And it's reluctant. As opposition leader, I led that charge along with UKIP at that time to introduce those 2 hours free car parking. It's not a nice thing that I stand here today and have to defend the decision to scrap those 2 hours. Not something I willingly want to do. But I understand the anger from people upstairs. I really do. It's not something we've done lightly. But certain individuals have used this to promote themselves, putting fake photos on social media showing empty car parks hours before shops open. Madam Mayor, I'd have a guess that half the residents who use those shops were still in the beds when these photos were taken, and then saying that certain towns are ghost towns. That is plain wrong. It's leading people up the garden path. It's talking our towns and villages down when, as serious politicians, we should be talking them up. I believe every one of our 72 members in this chamber wants to talk Dudley and its town centres up. Unfortunately, we have people in this chamber, people who presented the petition, who want to glorify themselves in talking Dudley and town centres down. And Madam Mayor, that is wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Harley.
Go up there and take a selfie.
No. There isn't enough time to take another speaker, so the decision is that the 30 minutes allowed have been debated and now expired. The petition has been referred to the Director of the Environment. I'm now going to propose a short, brief interlude in case anybody else wishes to leave. We'll take a break for a couple of minutes, everybody, okay? Very kind. And then last. Can I just remind everybody that a woman out there who wants to talk to us Right. At the last meeting, the council observed a minute's silence as a mark of respect to the late former Jenny Dunn, the councillor Jenny Dunn. We didn't take tributes at the last meeting because we were not a full house, but I suggested that we did the tributes now that we have virtually all the councillors here. So I now invite members to indicate to pay their tributes. I call on Councillor Karen Westwood.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Chamber. The eulogy that I've been asked to deliver tonight is actually from Deb Brownlee, who's trustee of St John's Church Preservation Group, Cateshill, Dudley. It's part personal memory and part relating to St John's. In Deb's words, I first knew Jenny Dunn 54 years ago when I was 13 years old and she was a young policewoman. I was part of a group that used to ride our horses along the old railway line, paths and tracks around the Crooked House and up to Bagridge and Pensnit, including all over Barry Bonk. Some chap had been acting unsavoury one day and parents thought this should be reported. Jenny came in plain clothes and joined the gang, walking around with us, hoping he would appear. We didn't find him, but Jenny got to know me and my family. Many years later, when I surfaced trying to save St John's, she became a supporter and a friend of St John's. After she retired, she gradually became more involved with the project. Over the last few years, she had been coming to St John's weekly as a volunteer helper, moral support, conversation to visitors, some quite needy, and occasionally security, where her approach, having spotted someone about to put something in their bag in our charity shop, was legendary. To appear behind them from nowhere with the lines, "Isn't that pretty? Shall I put that on the counter for you while you carry on looking?" She was a masterclass in sweetness and not missing a thing that was going on. She wanted to help us from her home as well. She grew plants for us to sell, did our washing and folded thousands of tombola tickets. She made the white altar cloths positively gleam. She would take the teddies for preparation to be prizes. They came back looking like new. She did sewing repairs and made fabric COVID masks at the time of the pandemic. Many superlatives have been used to describe Jenny. I'm not sure if the word selfless has been used. She used to make sure she bought plenty of items to help our fundraising, and almost everything was a gift for someone else or another group she was helping, such as her sewing and knitting groups. Her classic line at the pay point was, "OK, I've spent £16, will you take 20 for cash?" She always rounded up. We miss her so much. Latterly, she had been using our holistic corner on Fridays and receiving a back, head, neck and shoulder massage from holistic therapist Roy Lawrence, and sometimes a deep facial from Norma Dodds. She said these treatments helped a lot with her many health problems, and she did look better when she left. We were very pleased to see that the treatments helped her so much. She had sent a message to say she couldn't come in on Friday, the 2nd of September, as she was in bed with a flu-like illness, and apologising that she couldn't come in and help. No doubt she must have sent similar messages for other groups and meetings, always thinking of others. It came as a huge blow to read on Facebook in the early hours that she had died. We can never replace Jenny. We're sure everyone knew her will feel the same yawning gap where Jenny should be. We feel her presence in so many aspects of the St John's project. In her memory, we have continued our relationship with Cradley British Legion, and we have a candle lit for her in the church. This makes her only the second person ever to have a permanent candle, the other one being to Bert Bissell. We will never forget her. We thank Councillor Karen Westwood for reading this remembrance eulogy out on behalf of all the Friends of St John's. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. I now call on Councillor Peter Dobb.
first met her when I stood in Halsowing North a few years ago. Since the election, I came to know her and always found Jenny to be forthright in her opinions, very loyal to our party in the good and bad times, but above all, a true friend who I will dearly miss. As one of her ward councillors, I was honoured to follow her legacy in our ward, and I know the residents of Belvale appreciated the service that she did for them for over 10 years. I know myself and my other ward colleagues will miss her support and advice whenever we needed it. Jenny was ever present in our ward and at most delivery sessions across Halsowing, where everybody came to know her fondly. She was dedicated to our party and was unrivalled in it. Her support to all the candidates, whatever the election, was appreciated by every one of them, myself included. I fondly remember attending the remembrance services in Cradley and having her join us on the parade. She would always wear loads of poppy pins that she collected over the years, and was always fond of showing us any new ones she collected. And if anybody ever commented on them, she would give them away almost as quickly as she received them. In closing, Madam Mayor, I feel honoured to have been able to call Jenny a friend. And like so many colleagues from both sides of the floor, I will miss her not being around. God bless Jenny.
Thank you, Councillor Dobb. I call on Councillor Phipps.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So I haven't prepared a speech on Jenny, so this might be a little bit of a rambling, but I just didn't really know what I could fit into 5 minutes, but we'll see how it goes. First of all, can I thank Councillor Karen Westwood, because that was a really, really loving tribute towards Jen. And I didn't know half of the stuff that she actually did with St John's. And also that little story about her as a police officer as well, it really does sum her up quite a lot. And thank you to Councillor Dobb for those really, really kind words as well. I think it really did sum up her dedication to the Conservatives. And even if you didn't know Jenny, you were all very much profoundly affected by her, because she's the primary reason why I'm actually here. Jenny was my mentor. I first met her in 2010, primarily through Angus Adams, who is a partner, and she got me involved in Halsowing Conservatives several years later, when she said, would you like to be a candidate for election? Little did I know what I was actually letting myself in for at that point. But once she'd got your claws into you, you really couldn't escape, because Jenny was one of those kind of infectious characters where you really, really did... You didn't want to leave. Sometimes Jenny would make you feel a little bit uptight, because Jenny was one of those sorts of abrasive characters maybe, but you always still had a very, very fond place in your heart, and I was lucky that I never fell out with her, apart from that one time on a car park about some leaflets. But I was very lucky in that sense. But even people that grew distant from her have talked about her fondly ever since. She was a police officer. She told me a really funny story once about the time when she was a sergeant in Stourbridge, and this sums up Jenny quite a lot, so I'll briefly share it. She was dealing with an incident outside the Checkers at the top of the high street, and one of her regular customers was kind of annoying her while she was trying to execute this arrest. She turned around to him and she said, "Get round the station, you're nicked." And the bloke actually just did. He didn't need to be arrested. He plodded along to the police station. When Jenny got back to the police station, she was like, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "You said I was nicked, Sergeant Jen." So he went round to the police station and stayed there until Jenny got back. Her dedication to the Conservative Party was totally unrivalled. I think she started working, her parents got her doing things for the Conservatives, like folding letters and stuff, when she was about 4 years old. So I think she's got 70 years worth of service to the Conservative Party, which is quite incredible when you think about that staying power through all those different eras of politics. And over the last few years, she certainly didn't let us forget that sometimes she wasn't necessarily that pleased with how things were going. And she did make a funny comment about the general election, saying, well, if we lose this one, I'm either going to leave the country or die. And she'd always make ridiculous things like that. She'd constantly threaten to leave the Conservative Party, didn't she? She was resigning every 5 minutes, but she never would. And this was her final sort of I'll get your own back now, because I'll actually do one of them. And eggs on our face now, isn't it? But But she was just incredibly dedicated to the Conservative Party, and that can't really be summed up any more than the fact that just a couple of months before she passed away, she stood in the election as a Conservative candidate in Quarry Bank. And I'll pull the curtain back now so everybody knows how sometimes a little bit thrown together local politics can be. Because quite frankly, we couldn't really find anybody else to stand that year because we had to do all 72. And Jenny very much was talked into it, had to be talked into it. But in reality, she was always going to do it if we asked. And the fact that she was doing that, and she was supporting Councillor Rob Clinton, she was folding and stuffing the letters because she wouldn't want to stand without at least contributing in some way. So for that sheer amount of dedication, for incredible memories, and for a hell of a lot of personal support to me, I cannot thank Jenny Dunn enough. On behalf of the residents of Belle Vale, we will all miss her, and I will dearly miss her as well. Thank you, Jen. And thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. I call on Councillor Stan.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I didn't quite hear with the clapping going on. It put me off a little bit. It's not my hearing. It was the clapping that did it. Madam Mayor, I stand because I probably look around and I'm probably one of the only members of the council now that served with her actually on the council here in Dudley. A formidable lady in the two capacities, a police officer, a sergeant, and also a local councillor. I learnt an awful lot about the flats in Highfields from her over a good many years, and the conversations were not really on my own with Jenny Dunn, but former councillor Bob James was always involved as well, and they were a team to be beaten. They worked so hard for the community. They lived and breathed about Belle Vale in every respect. And they would come to me to discuss various things. What should we do about this? What should we do about the other? And we worked together as a team. Reference has been made to Angus Adams, former councillor Angus Adams. I served with him as well on this authority, although he is no longer with us. And I knew the relationship between the two. It was a very positive, good relationship as far as politics is concerned. And, you know, a lot was to be gained. But coming back to the comments that Councillor Westwood made from Deb Brownlee and her involvement with St James's, that surprised me because I wasn't actually aware of that situation, what was going on there. But, you know, she was a lady that, and I use the word lady in the right sense, her heart and soul. But what I'm standing up for, basically, Madam Mayor, is to say that's the person that sets an example for all of us, serving the community. She served the community all her life in one form or the other, whether a police officer or a local councillor. She took her job seriously and made certain what she was doing was done right, correctly, and everyone benefit from it. It was a pleasure in life knowing her, to be perfectly truthful, Madam Mayor. Although in recent years I hadn't seen an awful lot of her, to be perfectly truthful, but you know, you get to know what's going on in other parts. I'm from the north, and she's from a place referred to as the Deep South. So we're sort of poles apart there. But whatever activities she's doing, it's always brought to my attention one way or the other. But it was a pleasure in life knowing such a lovely lady that had such a great commitment, not only to the constabulary, the West Midlands, but also to this council. A lot was achieved with that situation between her and former councillor Bob James, who worked so hard, so very much hard, for the good folk of Belle Vale. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stanley. I call Councillor Ian Bevan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I first met Jenny back in 2018 when I was out campaigning with ex-councillor Jake Cooper, and halfway through the proceedings he insisted that we stop off at this house in Hales Owen. We let ourselves in. We walked down the hall and into the kitchen. He opened the fridge, drank several cans of pop, filled his pockets with chocolates and sweets, and grabbed a packet of crisps out on the way. He poked his head round the lounge door, shouted, "Bye, Jenny," and we left. That was my introduction to Jenny's Pick and Mix. I met Jenny again when she took me out, having been selected as the candidate for Haley Green and Cradley South. I went campaigning with her in Rowley Regis, of all places, and straight away I knew that we had a formidable Conservative here and a formidable public servant. It's already been said, Madam Mayor, she was a proud and loyal supporter of the Royal British Legion. And each year, as I take part, as you do, Madam Mayor, we walk through Halesdale Town Centre, and I look at all the wreaths and the poppies and the badges and everything red. And deep down, I know that Jenny probably supplied 90% of those. She also had, as Councillor Dobbs said, a fantastic collection of poppy badges, brooches, keyrings, everything that you could ever wish for. If you were a serious collector, she could fill the gap for you. She would also pin badges on empty lapels when the occasion called for it. And for the first few years, Madam Mayor, I thought that she walked with a gait. I now understand it was the weight of the poppy collection on the inside of her jacket, which she would open for you to take your pick. And as Councillor Dobbs said, whether she'd had it for years or whether she had just obtained it, if you wanted it, you could have it. Parade won't be the same this year, Madam Mayor, without Jenny's presence, and we will come together to remember those who paid the ultimate price for our liberty. There will be a space in my heart missing Jenny on that day as well. She was a massive character in our association. Jenny and I didn't always see eye to eye. To be honest, Madam Mayor, I was never going to come up to expectations because I hadn't been delivering and campaigning since I was 4. So that was never going to happen. She didn't bear a grudge. We got on with it, and I will miss her input in the association greatly. And finally, for those of you that were present at the funeral recently, I have checked and the chandelier is still tinkling. We will all miss Jenny in our own way, Madam Mayor, and wherever she may have gone, I hope they have the leaflets ready. Rest in peace, Jenny.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Bevan refers to the fact that the guy who was carrying the flag for the Royal British Legion had a bit of trouble getting it out, and then he put it down in a mark of respect, and then he had to pull it up very suddenly like this, and the chandelier. I personally think that Jenny would be up somewhere up in heaven, laughing her socks off at that. I'm going to call now on Councillor Ethan Stafford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also had the chance to attend Jenny's funeral in September. And can I just say what an incredible turnout it was? A lady who was spoken of ever so highly by all that knew her. Sadly, I didn't get the privilege of knowing Jenny all that well. And from the many heartfelt comments that were shared, I realised what a loss that is. My first and unfortunately only time of meeting Jenny was at the James Grove Trustees meeting in early August this year, where she warmly welcomed me into her home. Upon leaving, Jenny invited me to return any time, to which Councillor Phipps jokingly reminded her he's a Liberal, remember. But Jenny repeated, "You're welcome any time." Although I didn't know her well, it was lovely to have the chance to meet her. On behalf of myself and my colleagues, I'd like to extend our deepest condolences to Jenny's family, friends, and all the members in the room who knew her so well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stafford. I call on Councillor Ian Kettle.
I had the fun of sitting next to Jenny in this chamber, and it was like being next to a walking, talking sweet shop. Whenever she opened the door, it was full of sweets, and the racket and the number of sweets she would consume throughout one of the meetings is nobody's business. But I met Jenny years ago, and I've frankly known her so long, I can't tell you how long. But the thing about Jenny, in that I learnt more about her at a funeral than I did knowing her all that years. In many respects, her dedication covered her privacy, and she was a very private person in some respects. But I've never got away from her unflinching enthusiasm for her involvement in what we were doing. And we popped in, the wife and I popped in and had a cup of tea with her a few months ago. And we had to wade through the boxes down the hall in the house. She was probably the great storeroom for leaflets in the area. But sitting next to her was great fun. And she'd retired from the police, I believe, with a heart problem. And you'd never believe it, the way the hours she spent doing what she wanted to do, with all the enthusiasm. But her dedication came through time and time again. And she never flinched from her dedication to the cause. And you don't get many like Jenny. She didn't alter, she didn't change, she just carried on. We'll miss her. Sad as her loss. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kettle. A call on Councillor Jeff Hill.
Madam Mayor, a lot has been said about Jenny. I don't have a lot to add up to that. But as we've heard, she was a true community councillor, and she was always there for constituents and for the party, long before she was a councillor, while she was a councillor, and long after she was a councillor. She was always prepared to speak her mind, and you could be pretty sure that whenever you had a conversation with her, she would tell you something that was going to be an opinion that disagreed with you. And as others said, she was always telling us that we were going to kill her off shortly. Something we never believed really would ever happen. And as Councillor Kettle mentioned, she always had sweets in her drawer. And those sweets didn't just get eaten by Jenny. They didn't just get shared with her neighbours. They didn't just get shared with the whole of our group. That bag of sweets would gradually make its way around the entire chamber before getting back to her drawer. And I think that was Jenny in a nutshell, that she was always there and prepared to share with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. We have two more speakers. I've got Councillor Daniel Bevan and then Councillor Harley. So, Councillor Bevan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Jenny supported me from the very start of my journey as a candidate and then into a councillor. Her door was always open, her fridge was always stocked and the kettle was always on. I remember one Remembrance Parade, Jenny was there with an array of poppy pins on her lapel. I wasn't aware of Jenny's generosity with the poppy pins at this point, and I took a liking to one of them and I asked her about it, at which point she took it off her jacket, removed it from her coat and she handed it to me and then proceeded to put £5 in the bucket that she was holding. I now had a poppy pin that I hadn't given a donation for, and I'd also had it removed from somebody else's jacket. She made everyone feel very welcome, no matter how busy she was. Her kindness, generosity and dedication to our community will be sorely missed. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. And call on the last speaker, Councillor Patrick Harley.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll keep it very brief. Just contrast the conversation in this room compared to the last debate. Doesn't events like this bring out the best in all quarters of this chamber? We've had a tribute from the Liberal Democrats. We've had a really informed tribute from Councillor Westwood and the very emotive tribute by Councillor Phibbs, who knew her on a very, very personal nature. They certainly broke the mould when they made Jenny Dunn. She was tough, and you really didn't want to be in the sides when she had one on her. She was gunning for you. Oh, crikey, you got out the way. But she didn't hold that against you forever. She was also very generous. She was kind. She was helpful. She was supportive of candidates and party members. As Simon said, even right up to the end, being a candidate and supporting our candidate, Rob Clinton, by folding letters, newsletters, whatever, being true to the cause to right to the end. You know, we have fair weather supporters. When they elect a leader they don't want, they leave. When they introduce a policy you don't want, they leave. We have that. You guys have that. Same with Lib Dems, Reform, whoever. We all have those fair weather supporters. But she wasn't. She was a true supporter of the Conservative Party right up until the very end. We won't see her like again. I could tell many tales of group conversations concerning Jenny Dunn, but I can't, not in this chamber. Be appropriate at the bar, Madam Mayor, but the language would just be too right. But there are some genuinely funny stories concerning Jenny that one day I hope I can share with
other members around the room rather than just the Conservative ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. I actually knew Jenny quite well. She was never a councillor at the same time as me, but she was always around. And I always found her friendly. She loved a joke. No one's mentioned her cake. When we set up the Friends of Liso's wall garden, she would regularly attend there. And yes, you're right, she provided the food. They were great occasions. And I thought her funeral was a very fitting tribute to her. So thank you for everybody who's spoken tonight. And somebody might say, I'm going to put this now, somebody might say they've just wasted half an hour talking about somebody who's not here anymore. Well, how else are you going to say how much you admire someone and your opportunity? You can't do it at the funeral, you can't. And you can't really put it in a letter. But there's nothing that I think is wrong with those of us who know someone in the council chamber who we know has worked hard, that we spend time paying tribute to them. Thank you. Oh, I don't think I allow clapping, sorry. Right, on to other things then. The Himley fireworks event will be on the 2nd of November. I hope you've all got your welly boots ready to go and watch the fireworks. I have heard there's a bit of a rumour, why haven't we got the bonfire? Well, if you don't know what's going on at Himley Hall, then you obviously don't visit very often, because they've just built a great big huge wooden play area. So you don't put a bonfire right next door to that, do you? Right, the Civic Remembrance Service is Sunday, the 10th of November, my birthday I have. Also Councillor Sahota's birthday, so there you go. And the Armistice service will be on the 11th of November, both in Priory Gardens, opposite the Council House. The Christmas light switch-ons will take place. I and my consort will be in Halesowen on the 16th, Dudley on the 23rd, yes, that's right, Stourbridge on the 30th, and on the 1st of December, the Deputy Mayor is going to do the Sedgley ones. Am I right?
Stourbridge.
You're doing Stourbridge? Oh, beg your pardon, beg your pardon. I thought I got that right. Never mind, I'll check my diary. At this point, I'm going to call on the leader to move a vote of thanks to Ian. Oh, sorry, I'm going to call on Councillor Clark, beg your pardon, to lead us in a tribute to Ian Newman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ian Newman, our 151 officer, has been with the council for the last 36 years, man and boy, and for the last 14 years as our finance director. He steered us through 20% real term reduction in resources. Now, I've worked with Ian for the last 9 years, and during that time, we've had our challenges. And he has never, ever, as you're all aware, shied away from giving difficult and unpopular messages when he's needed to. So I'd like to thank him for his loyalty, for his hard work, and his dedication to the Dudley residents, members, and Dudley as a borough. I spoke to him last week and said, "What are you planning?" I said, "Have you planned any nice walks?" Because he was a massive walker, he walked all up different mountains. So I said, "Have you planned that?" He said, "No." He says, "Mrs. Newman has different ideas." And so some of the jobs that he's not been able to get around to, apparently he's going to be doing those for the next few months. So I'd just like to thank you, Ian, for what you've done for us, and enjoy your retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We now move on to... Oh, I beg your pardon, Councillor Ali, I haven't spotted you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I also take this opportunity to thank Ian, who, as we know, has retired as Director of Finance, for his remarkable 36 years of public service, and including 14 years as the Section 151 officer. I have always found him to be competent, professional, and a source of sound advice and support to me over the years. He faced numerous challenges in recent times, especially in keeping this council financially afloat. He was the first to shed light on the MIPIM saga, which revealed that the Conservative administration had wasted hundreds of thousands of public money.
Councillor
on
Ali,
what
please
can only be-
please can we keep this as a
It's-
tribute to
it is a
Mr.
tribute,
Newman?
Madam Mayor. What can only be described as a jolly. Whenever he felt a decision was not in the best interest of the council or taxpayers, he did not hesitate to make that clear. Madam Mayor, I also want to take this opportunity, as I might not get it later, to thank Rachel Cooper, Deputy 151 Officer and Head of Financial Services, for her support to me and all the work she has been doing behind the scene for a very long time. Sadly, I'm not sure if it is public knowledge, but
I hope you're
have
not
been...
going to say what I think you're going to say. Please don't.
Any particular reason, Madam Mayor?
We're not supposed to. We don't talk about officers, and this is a tribute to Ian.
Yeah, but I believe she's also leaving the authorities. I want to wish her well. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And the reason why I stopped you, Councillor Ali. Okay, let's move on. Thank you for your tribute, Councillor Clark. Right, and we're now going to move on to agenda item 6, reports and recommendations. I call on the leader to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the Council, I move that the recommendations of the Cabinet set out in the report be approved and adopted. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. The second.
Formally seconded, Madam Mayor.
I'm just checking. I have no speakers at the moment. Anybody wish to speak? That agreed? Thank you. It's carried. I haven't even bothered to come back to you, Leader. We're now on to the appointment of officer responsible for the proper management of the council's finances, Section 151 of the Local Government Act 1972. I ask the leader to move.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I move that Brendan Arnold be appointed to the post of Interim Director of Finance and that Mr Arnold be designated as the officer responsible for the proper management of the Council's finances pursuant to Section 151 of the Local Government Act 1972.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. All agreed? That's carried. We now turn to agenda item 7, the Constitution and related matters. Constitution-related matters. Before I call on the leader, there are 2 vacant positions for the council to appoint this evening. Firstly, I call for a nomination for the Vice Chair of the Environment and Regeneration Select Committee. Do I have any nominations? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We nominate Councillor Mushtaq Hussain.
Thank you. I see I have Councillor Ryan Priest.
I nominate Councillor Andrew Tromans.
And I need to check who is seconding Councillor Mushtaq Hussain. And who is seconding Councillor Tromans. Thank you. Any other nominations? Right, we'll go to the vote and I will put them in the order they were nominated. You just need to vote positively, right? We don't want any, don't count, no. And you vote for the councillor that you wish to take this position. Okay? So first of all, I'm going to call on Mushtaq Hussain. All those who wish to have Mushtaq Hussain take this position, vote now. think we're... Oh, you haven't finished yet? That's 30 votes. We don't count the against. You just have to vote in favour. You just need to vote in favour of who you would want. So, you okay? I'll tell you what we'll do. I've got a whole bunch of people wanting to speak as well. Come on, guys. I think I'll take that again. You only vote yes. You vote yes for Mushtaq, or you vote yes for the, Councillor Tromans. You don't do any no's. And then I will count up how many voted yes, how many voted yes, and then we'll declare the winner. Right, shall we have another go? Right, please indicate if you wished it to be Councillor Mushtaq Hussain. Right. Oh, somebody's... I'm going to find who that person is. Right. I think we're safe to say that was 31 votes. We now turn to Councillor Tromans. All right. Just waiting for that to go. Please vote if you want it to be Councillor Tromans. I've still got somebody voting up. I think we've reached the point where I can declare that's 31 to 36. So So Councillor Tromans has been elected as the new chair of that committee. Congratulations, Councillor Tromans. Right. We now, which one was that one? Ernest Stevens Trust. Yes, we're down now to the Ernest Stevens Trust. Right. I now call for nominations for the vice chair of the Ernest Stevens Trust Management Committee. Anybody wish to nominate someone? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May we nominate Councillor Jason Griffin, please?
Councillor. And it's seconded by? Thank you. Any other nominations tonight? Ernest Stevens Trust? Well, there we go. Councillor Jason Griffin, you have been, where have you gone? I can't even see where you're sitting. Right, congratulations, you have been duly elected. Right. We're now down to, I now call on the leaders to move the remaining recommendations in the report. Oh, they're complicated.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the Council, I move 1, that with reference to the report of the independent panel concerning the members' allowance scheme, recommendation 6.1 in the panel's report concerning the continuation of the annual indexing arrangements be approved and adopted, that the designation of and remuneration for member champions be not pursued during the 2024-25 municipal year. And number 2, Madam Mayor, that the recommendation in paragraph 6 of the report of the Deputy Monitoring Officer be deferred for further consideration. And finally, Madam Mayor, that the remaining recommendations in the report of the Deputy Monitoring Officer be approved and adopted. Thank you.
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Does anybody wish to speak? I call on the leader to reply. No? Oh, sorry, Councillor Kesey. Bit too late on the button there.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very quickly, I just want to say I think the decision to withdraw the member champions is the right one, and I thank the leader for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kesey. So I turn to the leader.
you, Madam Mayor. The members' allowance scheme is looked into every 4 years by the independent panel. The next review, I believe, is next year in 25, and we can look at that and a lot more at the appropriate time. Thank you. All right.
Good. We now turn to notices of motion. I'd like to remind members that under the Council Procedure Rule 12.5, the maximum time allowed to deal with all notices of motion is 30 minutes. If the notices of motion are not dealt with within this period, they will be referred to the next ordinary meeting of the Council. So I call upon Councillor Wayne Little to move the motion in his name as set out in the agenda. And could you tell me who the seconder is, please, Councillor Little? Thank you very much. So I call on Councillor Little to move.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just before I read out the full movement, I just want to make it everybody note that the second paragraph in the original motion was submitted at a time before a subsequent rise of the energy price cap. So there's a slight amendment in wording that we're putting to it. I've spoken to Democratic Services this evening around that, and it's just to give you a verbal update on it, that it will now read, with the energy price cap reduced, in brackets, originally down from 1,700 to 1,600 earlier this year. It has since increased further to 1,829, which is the autumn period, October to December. Therefore, the decision to restrict this payment will mean millions of pensioners facing even higher bills from October 2024. This motion before us tonight is about choices. Choices that we have, but many of our pensioners do not. It's my choice to be a voice and support the pensioners of Brierley Hill and Worsley South. Your choice to join me tonight to support the pensioners losing the winter fuel payments in your wards and across the wider Dudley Borough. I believe it shows we understand the situation and we stand by those that it affects the worst. Those who have no choice and need their voices to be heard. No choice for those that cannot find the extra money they have relied upon to keep themselves warm, comfortable and safe in their own homes. They can't choose to earn the extra money that they need. It's a payment which has been their safety blanket that helps remove the genuine worry and fear that they have due to the high costs of fuel they face this winter. Now, the Labour government says it's about removing money from those that don't need it. Whereas we, and even I'm sure members across the House, know it's about the millions of pensioners who rely on those payments, who have worked hard during their lives, who are just about managing in their later years, and who will now suffer because of the Labour's choice to introduce such a restrictive eligibility for the revised scheme, taking away support from them without any extra protection and without fair notice. Even though by Labour's own estimates in a study which they carried out, they predict that thousands could die. That just does not make sense. They're crucifying us. Those of us that have worked hard to look after ourselves are being crucified, and it ain't fair. That's what June Charter, 87, said to me on Saturday at Brierley Hill Market. She's losing her winter fuel payment, and listening to her story and the circumstances, along with many others we've spoken to, she certainly didn't appear to me to be someone who doesn't need it. Or like Joan Colborne, 71. She told me how she has spent her whole life looking after the elderly as a carer, working for Dudley Council. She's not someone you'd say doesn't need it either. But because of her small council pension of just over £30 a week, it puts her just over the limit, so she'll lose the allowance too. She told me how she feels like she'd looked after people all of her life, but now, in the time when she needs it, they won't look after her. So members, Supporting this motion means you choose to stand by the pensioners of your wards and across the Dudley Borough, who still need that lifeline payment, but who are losing it through Labour's senseless attack. Tonight, we all have choice. So please join me and vote to support this motion before you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Little. We now move to the first amendment that has arrived, and it's in the name of Councillor Winterfield, that's right, here in Casey. It has been seconded. All right then, is it seconded? Surprise, surprise. Thank you.
Has it gone red? Formally seconded, Madam
Thank you
Mayor.
very much. We now move to the amendment in the name of Councillor Kieran Casey.
Move the amendment and say a few words, if that's...
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've listened to what's just been said by Councillor Littler, and I want to say a few words about why I've put this amendment forward. Now, I know that everyone in this chamber recognises and understands the depth of feeling and the concerns that residents, particularly elderly residents, have as a result of these changes. And I know that all of us always have and always will want to do everything we can to ensure that residents we represent, particularly elderly residents, are heard, and that we ensure they have all the help and support that they need. And that's why it's important that we do put across to government their concerns. So in amending the motion, Madam Mayor, I've attempted to build on some of the actions set out in the original statement, things such as the importance of cross-party agreement on this, and for me in particular, the actions that we want this council to take on behalf of our communities and representing them to government. In it, members will see that I've made additional calls to action, writing to the Prime Minister as well as the Chancellor of the Exchequer about this issue. The importance, again, at looking at the eligibility criteria, as is mentioned in the original motion, and what we want to see happen in terms of representing residents and avoiding that cliff edge, as has already been mentioned. I've also said that we should be calling on the government to look again at things like the windfall tax, to bring in further revenue, which can support elderly and vulnerable residents, as well as recommitting ourselves to that joint working to ensure elderly residents across our borough have the help and support they need. So I hope that members around the chamber will agree with me when I say I believe that my amendment actually strengthens the original motion. It will allow us to put across residents' concerns to the highest levels of government from our communities about this issue, and does allow us to do that on, as the original motion spoke about, on that cross-party basis. And not only that, as we've heard tonight, this is an opportunity, I think, as members, including the leader, have mentioned tonight, about grown-up and sensible politics. So I'll move the amendment, Madam Mayor, and hopefully we can agree this and get this letter sent off to government straight away. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Casey. Casey. Is seconded by?
Seconded, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I open this up to debate. I've got a call on Councillor Simon Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Casey, for putting forward this amendment. I give you a great tribute for being able to try and make it sound as though this strengthens the original motion, when in reality, I'm afraid it does nothing but water it down into almost meaning nothing. One of the key principles in Councillor Little's motion is actually proposing a way that we can support those who will be missed out of pension credit and therefore the winter fuel payment, so they can receive some support this winter. That's totally removed from this amendment and ultimately does nothing to actually try and suggest how we make sure they get the support that they need. And I can talk about that when we come to debating the main motion, should this amendment fall. The other part of this, which is quite offensive on the eye, is the second to last point. acknowledging the work of the borough's 5 MPs to promote advice to those impacted by this change. And in fairness, they've held advice surgeries and tried to reach out to pensioners. Don't think they've gone as far as myself and several colleagues have in Hales Owen and gone out there and hand-delivered letters to them to try and get them some advice and support about this issue, and to offer assistance with filling out the ridiculous pension credit application form, which throughout several governments has pretty much been a bit of a shambles. But what it doesn't even mention is the fact that most of those ones, and all of the Labour ones except one, all the Labour members of Parliament except one, voted to take away the winter fuel payment from those pensioners who are going to be in that position this winter. There was one Labour MP that didn't vote. That Labour MP is a councillor and should be sat in this chamber right now, but she isn't. She didn't vote in Westminster on that day because, according to the Stourbridge News, she was attending a drinks reception in Stourbridge. I wonder what pensioners think about that. But in summary about this amendment, it waters down the original motion. It removes the suggestion of a way to deal with this issue, and all it does is seeks to save people on the Labour benches some embarrassment by having to call out, quite frankly, an atrocious decision by their new government. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. I call Councillor Sean Kesey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very briefly, I totally agree, Councillor Little, with the ethos of your notice of motion, but I also agree with Councillor Casey. I think that the amendment makes the notice of motion more acceptable for the whole chamber, because, personal opinion, I think the original notice of motion is very political. And Councillor Phipps, I agree with a lot of what you've said. I must be honest, it really surprised me that one of the first actions of a Labour government was to take away the winter fuel allowance, you know, but hey-ho. I think that you think that this amendment waters down the notice of motion politically, and I don't think it does. I really welcome the second part where it mentions windfall taxes on oil and gas companies, which I think should have been the government's first port of call. It shouldn't be Dudley Council asking that they look at it. So I'll be supporting the amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kesey. I call on Councillor Caulfield.
On the elderly in our society, by an out-of-touch Labour Prime Minister and a Labour government. If it wasn't for the elderly in society, Madam Mayor, none of us would actually be here. And we're all going to be elderly one time in our lives, hopefully. Madam Mayor, it not only affects tens of thousands of people throughout the country, but it also affects all our wards to every 72 councillors that are here tonight. And I speak tonight...
Councillor Caulfield, can I stop you there? You're not speaking to the amendment, you're speaking to the motion.
Yeah, the motion, yeah. I support the motion.
No, but we're doing the amendment at the moment.
Okay.
I think you should do that when you get to the main motion.
Okay.
Okay. Please let me speak to the amendment. Thank you.
Understood, Madam Mayor, and thank you for calling me to speak. May I say how much I'm enjoying my new seat in this chamber? The Labour government has had every opportunity to climb down from this decision, to listen, to review, to change course. Instead, it is pushing ahead with this performative act of cruelty for a saving of around £1.3 billion. In the context of our nation's finances, that is barely enough to cover around 8 weeks of spending on HS2. Indeed, that saving may soon be wiped out by an increase of applications for pension credit, no doubt brought on by the efforts of Councillor Phipps. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, never in the field of British politics has so much public goodwill been spent for so little purpose. While I am sure that every elected member in this chamber wants to act in the best interests of the more than 50,000 Dudley residents who have been in receipt of winter fuel allowance before now, I cannot help but feel that this motion was actually designed to create discomfort.
Councillor
For the,
Trump,
I'm getting to that, Madam Mayor, for the Labour Group.
Speak to the amendment, please.
I am
not
speaking to the
motion.
amendment, and I shall issue a piece of advice for my former colleagues now. Do not vote for this mealy-mouthed amendment, which, as I understand it, may be in the name of Councillor Casey, but has been partially penned by a Labour MP and my ward colleague who should be here tonight. To my former colleagues, I plead with you, get up from off your knees. You know that this is wrong. Do not allow yourself to become collateral damage for a Westminster elite that uses and discards you. You're all worth so much more than that. Do not allow the party opposite you, the party of austerity, who created untold misery in our communities for more than a decade, to lecture you about welfare cuts. Your residents chose you to represent them, not Keir Starmer, not Rachel Reeves. You have voting buttons in front of them. Use them to vote for the original motion as written by Councillor Little. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tromans. I call on Councillor Alan Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't wish to talk on the amendment or the motion, but feel I should offer my belated declaration of interest in this matter.
In the same tone, Councillor Taylor, so should I. So should I. Right, I have no speakers on the amendment, so Councillor Little, would you like to use your right of reply? You have the right of reply.
Thank you for the right to reply, Madam Mayor. I've listened to what's been said this evening, and I just wish to stick with the original amendment as written out and the speech that I wrote and read earlier on. I think that touches at the heart of it. Having spoken to the people who this affects out there, that is the real intention of what this motion is about. As it's been said tonight, we really need this decision by the Labour government for them to look at it again and reconsider the indiscriminate way in which it's really having a cliff edge for those people. And I think the original motion covers that, and it doesn't require the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Little. So I put to you all the amendment in the name of Councillor Keir and Casey. So please vote. Those in favour, those against, and those who wish to abstain. I think we're nearly there. Yes, 67. One or two haven't voted. Fair enough, the amendment falls. So we now move to the motion unamended. I will now take speakers. Councillor Caulfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As an hearing impaired member, Madam Mayor, I don't make any excuses for my passion for the elderly in our country. But as I said before, I fully support this motion. It's a cruel attack from an out-of-touch Labour Prime Minister and government against the elderly in our country. If it weren't for the elderly pensioners in our country, Madam Mayor, none of us would be here, as I said a few minutes ago. And we're all going to get to an age where we need help. So it's, for a government to make a decision like this is totally disgraceful. But as we've seen from the motion, it's affecting tens of thousands of residents throughout the country. But not only that, I speak tonight for mine and Councillor Sandal's residents in Sedgley who have contacted us both with great concern, some of which frightened that they couldn't turn the central heating on to keep warm, and also frightened that they were going to have to make a decision whether they either eat or keep warm. So I fully support this motion, Madam Mayor, and I thank you for letting me speak twice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Caulfield. I call on Councillor Ryan Priest.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We all know that the previous Conservative government crashed the economy, pushed household finances to the brink, and forced residents across the country into a heat or eat crisis. So I rise to congratulate the Labour government for ending that crisis by ensuring that pensioners are unable to choose either. When Labour promised change, I didn't think they meant this, and I suspect that many of those on the Labour benches in this chamber didn't either. To actively and knowingly vote to push vulnerable people into poverty is a disgrace. The winter fuel payment needed reform. Nobody would deny that. The taxpayer should not be subsidising millionaires. But the threshold that the Labour government has set is far too low. This decision will push thousands of people into poverty. I have residents who are £20 above the limit. They will lose their winter fuel allowance. They are not the millionaires that Labour seem to have convinced themselves that they are going after. I have residents who live in genuine fear about this winter. Now, I've had to listen for the 10 years of my membership as the Liberal Democrats from members of the Labour Party tell me that austerity is a choice. But it's fascinating that now the Labour Party's in government that it's not a choice anymore, is it? Now, Labour will get their comeuppance at the next election. I've got no doubts about it. At the next general election and at every local election in between. Good councillors elected in May in this authority and authorities across the country who work hard for their communities, who frankly deserve re-election, will fall one by one because of their political affiliation, and you're a fool if you think otherwise. In preparation for tonight's meeting, I decided to research the Labour Party's constitution. So before we vote, I thought it would be best to remind my colleagues in the Labour Party of Article 2B. A just society, which judges its strength by the conditions of the weak as much as the strong, provides security against fear and justice at work, which nurtures families, promotes equality of opportunity, and delivers people from the tyranny of poverty, prejudice, and the abuse of power. That's a noble cause, and it's one I agree with. It's very odd that the Labour Party themselves don't. So I'll be supporting this motion tonight, just as all 72 Liberal Democrat MPs voted against this cut in Westminster a month ago. I do so in a perhaps naive hope that the government is listening or cares what we do here, or maybe I just do it as a point of principle. But my message is more for the disgruntled members in the Labour group. I have no doubt that you've been whipped to vote against this motion, to blindly back a Westminster government that couldn't care less about you. You've been whipped to vote for you have been whipped to vote to the end of your own political careers, and many of you deserve better than that. The Labour Party has abandoned you just as much as it has abandoned the millions of pensioners, as well as its own principles. You should show it no loyalty. It's a political party, not a football team that you support through thick and thin. Should you decide to choose your morals and values over your membership, there is a place for you on this side of the chamber when you break the whip and vote for this motion tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Phipps.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm going to start my contribution on the main motion with some very rudimentary maths. 12 million people previously qualified for a winter fuel payment. The changes that have been implemented mean that roughly 10 million people will lose that. If we apply the same percentage, so 83% of the 15,479 claimants with a winter fuel payment in Hales Owen, that means that 12,847 pensioners will be losing their winter fuel payment this winter, at a time when energy bills are going up again. Now, we all know in reality it is not down to the reasons that Councillor Priest has put forward, although it does make a very convincing line, I'm sure it does. In reality, energy bills have increased significantly down to one main reason: global factors. down to the issues that have been happening across the world and the effects that's had on the UK energy market. What has Labour said they would do? They promised in their manifesto we'll bring bills down by £300, something to that effect. In reality, they've not even been able to save winter fuel payments for pensioners in the first few months, not because of a black hole, total rubbish. It's because of the amount of money that they've put towards train drivers, put towards junior doctors. And yes, I'm sure we could all agree that people should be getting pay rises to cope with inflation, but absolute bank-breaking, inflation-busting pay rises that they've provided for is the reasons why this black hole now exists. It was a choice of the Labour Party in government to reward the unions rather than actually look after pensioners. I don't think very many train drivers or junior doctors will be struggling to pay their energy bills this winter, but if these figures are correct, a good proportion of the 12,000 odd people who have lost their winter fuel payment in Hales-Owen might be this year. So this motion, I absolutely welcome it because it gives a possible solution. Now, it's not perfect, but it is something that we've done in this council before. In the original energy crisis, the government provided support to people on bands A to D. So if you live in a property in those council tax bands, you had some support. And that was delivered to people through Dudley Council. It was delivered to people by the money coming from government to the council and the council passing that on. Now, you won't get an argument from me that there should be some level of means testing to the winter fuel payment because the richest don't need it. But the level that they've set it at is far too low. And this will help get quick support to most of the people that will need it this winter. Beyond that, it will require a far more targeted way of doing so, but this is the way of getting it done right now. So, on behalf of those 12,000 odd people in Hales-Owen, I hope that everyone in this chamber backs this motion and we send a message that this council is ready and willing to provide that support so long as the government is able to provide the funds like the last government did during the last energy crisis. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Phipps. We have 2 minutes left, and I think we need to make this decision tonight, so I shall be calling on. Councillor Little, would you like to reply before you go to the vote? Right, so we've got time to vote. Yes.
Once you call the vote, we'll like to ask for it to be amended.
Yes, I think you'll find they're all named votes. Well, you recorded. Okay. So I put to you, Councillor Little has decided not to exercise his right of reply, so we now move to the vote. All those in favour vote, all those against, and all who wish to abstain. Please vote. Yes. Steve. Thank you, everybody. The name vote is on the screen up there. Those in favour, 38. Those who wish to abstain, 29. So the motion has been carried. Thank you. All right, move on to the... Okay. We now move on to agenda item 9, which is the question time. In line with council procedure rules, the question time will involve a 30-minute time limit on the session. The first 3 questions to be offered to the main opposition group leader, here he's just coming back in. Other members will then be invited to ask questions. If the 30 minutes time limit is reached, any further questions can be submitted in writing. The usual process for 2 minutes per question, and any supplementary question will apply. I will be offering 2 questions to the Liberal Democrats. So I call on, first of all, Councillor Pete Lowe.
And the third one by Judy Foster. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I call on Councillor Sean Kesey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A bit of context before I ask my question to Councillor Clark. The 7 principles of public life outline the ethical standards of those working in the public sector, and that those are we're expected to adhere to. Principle 1.6 is honesty. Holders of public office should be truthful. At the extraordinary meeting of the Council on the 22nd of August, you stated to the members and everyone listening with regard to my point about the Brooks Bar debacle, that I was the Cabinet member responsible when this went through. At the Audit and Standards meeting on Monday the 14th of October that delved into the financial management and apparent mismanagement of Brooks Bar, Regeneration and Enterprise Director Helen Martin was very clear that Brooks Bar and its day-to-day operation was the direct responsibility of corporate landlord, part of the Regen and Enterprise portfolio, of which at the time Councillor Phipps was then the Cabinet member responsible. Intentionally or not, you misled the Council and Dudley residents on the 22nd of August. Will you acknowledge your error and apologise?
Thank you, Councillor Kesey. Yes, it's Councillor Clark to reply. Sorry, I was busy looking at the screen.
Thank you, Councillor Casey. After the conversation that we had, you also announced in that conversation that there was a £50,000 consultancy fee that was paid before the Brooks Bar was shut. That's actually complete nonsense. There was no consultancy fee paid at all. That was actually the wages of the head barman for 2 years. So you were completely wrong, and you were the one that was misleading council at that point. There's a picture when it opened with you and I standing outside the front, you going like this, very happy that it was opened because it was basically your responsibility at that time. So I don't agree with what you said, so no. Thank you.
Councillor Kesey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Someone's misleading everyone in this chamber because it's been clearly stated that the figure was actually £64,000 for a consultant, I think was mentioned in Audit and Standards. So someone needs to get their stories right. Yes, I was there at Brooks Bar and I did have my thumbs up because, do you know what? I wanted it to be a success and it wasn't. And the reason it wasn't, I believe, is because of some mismanagement. But you never answered my initial question, but I think everyone knows the answer. And so now that we know it wasn't me who was responsible for Brooks Bar losing almost £400,000, costing almost £1.5 million and leaving Dudley taxpayers with a bill that will take 30 years to pay, you are the Cabinet member for Finance. Councillor Bradley, the Deputy Leader, is, I believe, the Cabinet member responsible for Corporate Landlord, the department that was left to run Brooks Bar and £1.5 million of taxpayers' money into the ground. As I stated on the 22nd of August, this happened on your watch. You are the Cabinet members responsible. You either took your eyes off the ball or, even worse, allowed this reckless burning of taxpayers' money to go on and on unchallenged. The decent thing for you to do would be to apologise to Dudley taxpayers and then step down. Will you do the right thing? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't agree with you at all, Sean. Councillor Kesey, it was a commercial decision that was made, and I think you're completely wrong. So the figures that you've got are 64,000. I've got that as 50,000, and that was just for the wages. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I now call on Councillor Adam Aston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the Leader of the Council and relates to notices of motion. I'm sure he will agree that the ability of any councillor to submit a motion for debate gives the opportunity to each and every one of us, irrespective of position, to shape council policy on a range of issues that allow decisions to be made with immediacy, cognizant with the wider political climate. There are an increasing number of motions submitted by particularly members of the controlling group which call for things which are entirely within the power of the controlling group to enact. I use two motions which appear on today's agenda as examples, those submitted by Councillor Collins and Councillor Phipps. Whilst not questioning the intentions of either of those members, I actually fully support both motions. For example, I'm delighted that Councillor Phipps calls for the flying of the red ribbon flag to be flown on World AIDS Day, particularly as my request was refused in 2020, and I fully support the sale of red ribbons. No one is going to disagree with anything of those motions, so let's just do it. Madam Mayor, I'm not trying to stifle debate or discussion, but simply to refocus the purpose of motions to this council. So, does Councillor Harley agree that emphasis within motions should be on things rather or doing things rather than noting things, and that individual motions on very specific issues stretching over multiple council meetings can appear rather farcical to the people watching at home? And finally, can he commit to making sure that the actions called for in Councillor Phipps's motion, which we're not going to get to before World AIDS Day, are carried out? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Aston. I call on the Leader of the Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On that last point, yes. We get many requests to fly flags for all sorts of good causes. I can't remember many that are refused, and I can't recollect refusing that one that you suggest. So I'd like to go back and see whether that's actually factual. I think we've rejected probably 2 or 3 in my time as leader, and that's because someone else has got in there first, rather than actually disagreeing with that cause or aim. Reference to validity of notice of motions. All of the notices of motions that are in currently have all been checked by democratic services. They fit the criteria, and there is a strict criteria for putting forward notices of motions. These ones fit the bill, they've passed the test, and that's it. And I find it a bit odd that you should stand up and question the validity of some of those notices of motions when we had an excellent one that we passed in one evening on the winter fuel allowance, and your members couldn't support it. I think that is shocking and shameful. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. Councillor Aston? Do not wish to. Fine. I now call on Councillor Judy Foster.
Madam Mayor, and my question is to the Leader of the Council, and it's in relation to the Corporate Peer Challenge Review Team report that has been published. And my question is about the Independent Advisory Board, acronym is IAB, which the report itself refers to. So, quoting from the report, it says, although highly regarded, that's the IAB, the peer team has seen that the advice from the IAB has not been acted upon, and support from the board members has not been accepted. There is currently a lack of clarity around the future of the IAB and its membership beyond July, and this needs to be resolved quickly, with the peer team's view being that the board needs to continue. So we know now that the IAB is no longer in existence. It's been given its marching orders. The question then is, why has it been established when both the council and LGA have placed on record the value of its work, and the LGA itself has said it needs to continue?
Thank you, Councillor Foster. The Leader of Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't mention officers by name, but we have a very experienced officer that is here, that has done work as a commissioner for the government, has gone in as a troubleshooter to save local authorities from bankruptcy and get them out of financial strife. The LGA Peer Review Board, I believe, had its day. The advice it was giving, I don't think was constructive. There were people on that board who were certainly not adding anything of value. And unfortunately, I think the decision to stand down that board is correct. Do we need another improvement board? Yes. That should be headed up by the new so-called Golden Triangle, which is the new interim chief exec, new 151 officer, and the commissioner who is currently employed here on a temporary basis, who will act as a commissioner, who will go and put pressure on directors and their directorates and make sure that if there is an overspend, they manage that overspend so that they come in on budget. That's what an improvement board is, not the talking shop that she relates to. But of course, Madam Mayor, through you, Labour love nothing more than talking shops.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. Councillor Foster?
In regard to the officers mentioned, and obviously no names, and yet acknowledge the work that those officers have been doing so far, but they are both relatively inexperienced in terms of the Dudley context. So the LGA itself have commented on finance, governance and culture having become actually since its last assessment more serious, and it refers to deep-seated cultural shifts that the peer team says needs to be addressed. So how, in its new form, with new people, can such deep-seated issues be addressed?
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Harley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I cannot believe the statement from the Deputy Leader of the Opposition. How can you state that someone who has been used by government and is still being used by the government of the day to act as a troubleshooter, as a commissioner for local authorities, representing His Majesty's government to save councils from bankruptcy, is inexperienced? It beggars belief.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. I'm looking at those who wish to ask questions, and I haven't got one Liberal Democrat. Do I take it that you're not taking up your... Well, you have not indicated. Right. Yes, I've got one. So I call on Councillor Ethan Stafford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for whoever may be best placed to answer. Antisocial behaviour is becoming increasingly prevalent in our borough, and the residents of Crayley and Woollerscote are bearing the brunt of it. From the numerous incidents of stolen bikes to teenagers intimidating residents, and even the shocking event I was told about last week where an individual was threatened with a petrol bomb. This is unacceptable. Yet where are the police in all of this? Nowhere to be seen. The absence of an adequate police response raises serious concern. Just this week, I was asked by residents if they should take matters into their own hands. At this point, should I say yes? Because it looks like there is no consequences if they do. In one troubling instance, a resident reported their own child for stealing a bike and asked the police to intervene. But did they show up? No, they did not. This pattern of a non-response is leaving residents feeling helpless and abandoned. Our new local neighbourhood officer, PCSO Hall, has been a welcome presence in Crayley and Woollerscote, doing all he can with his limited powers. But without proper authority and adequate police support, he cannot tackle the growing epidemic of antisocial behaviour, an issue I know is not unique to my ward, but felt across the borough. My residents and I want to know what concrete steps are the council taking to address the rise in antisocial behaviour, and how do we reassure our residents that they can feel safe in their own homes when our police force is so unresponsive? Thank you.
Who was your question for? Councillor, you're going to take it, okay.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'll answer that. I mean, question is a valid one, valid concerns. I think it is a purely police matter. However, as local councillors, we should have an input in that. I'm more than happy to speak to the Chief Superintendent of Dudley and try and arrange a meeting so you can air those concerns face to face with him and his team. Okay, thank you.
Do you wish to speak?
Just one last thing that I just want to put across. Councillor Harley, would you consider writing to the police chief about the concerns of police non-attendance at resident association meetings across the borough? From one I attended a few weeks ago, we've been told that it's not the only one, that the police are just not showing when being invited. Thank you.
yes, I'd be more than happy to do that, Madam Mayor. And let's not forget that the police are controlled by the Police and Crime Commissioner, who's had a fantastic record of closing police stations. And Councillor Davis at the recent Brierley Hill Community Forum really did put the local commander under intense scrutiny as to why the decision had been made to base a police station almost on the border of Sandwell whilst closing Brierley Hill Police Station. And perhaps that's why our residents are plagued with antisocial behaviour when the police can't get to them in a timely fashion.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. I do apologise. I should have called you the Unity Group. I do apologise. So I call upon Councillor Andrew Tromans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Priest, for allowing me this opportunity to speak. In doing so, Councillor Priest is modelling one of the foundational behaviours of our group, which is collaboration. And it is in that spirit of collaboration that I would like to make two suggestions tonight in reference to the petition we heard earlier. As you know, I represent a ward with a town centre in the middle, and I'm sure other councillors in this room do as well, and the other councillors like me will have independent traders who are fearful for their prospects going forward. So relating to that, with Christmas fast approaching, yes, the C word, could we look at doing something for our traders? Could we offer reduced fees at the car parks, or perhaps waiving them? I open it up to you. It's a genuine question. I'm not trying to trip you up. The second suggestion is for the second phase of the parking plan, which is, can we look at residents' parking schemes, parking permit schemes, where the residents themselves want them. I'm thinking of a good example in my ward with narrow streets, the People's Republic of the Old Quarter, and I'm sure other people would have areas where it might be favourable as well. So I make those two suggestions. I look forward to the response and to working with you.
It was for you, Councillor Harley. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. The second phase of the parking strategy, as we roll that out, will, I believe, answer several of the concerns of particularly traders, where people want to stop, run in, pay a bill, do something, and run out, drop off materials, etc., produce. And also, I think it will address the concerns of residents when people aren't using the car parks and trying to park on the side streets. I believe phase 2 will also address that. And I've been around a long time, and I can remember the arguments and debates going back 20 years, even before I was a councillor, about parking permits, residents' parking permits. The Lib Dems, when they were on the council as a group previously, they tried to bring it in. Labour groups tried to bring it in. We've tried to bring it in different areas, and we've all failed. And I believe in phase 2, we'll have a proposal that may well keep residents and traders happy. Just remind me of the first bit. Christmas, that was it. I think what we have to do is get away from making decisions on the hoof. We've all been criticised, both controlling groups in the past for doing that and going back on decisions. However, we'll take that suggestion away, we'll get it costed so we can make a properly uniform decision. But what I can announce, Madam Mayor, in the last 40 seconds, is that Remembrance Sunday, the parking charges will be suspended all day on Remembrance Sunday, allowing people across the borough to pay respect to our armed forces in the appropriate manner and not have to worry about getting a parking ticket. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harley. Councillor Tromans, you wish to speak again?
Thank you for that response, Councillor Harley. And just to say that here as well, we all have difficult decisions to make in the coming months. Councils of all stripes are going bankrupt, and I do understand the financial position we're in, and I thank you for your response. Cheers.
I now call on Councillor Jackie Cowell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I ask the Cabinet Member for Housing why the imposition of service charges for tenants is being handled so badly? Consultation events not located or timed to meet the needs of tenants across the borough. Literature confusing. Service standards still extremely poor, particularly for grounds maintenance and cleaning, which has been the reason that charges were delayed initially. No explanation as to how they will improve come January. Given the confusion and worry that has been generated, will he at least consider delaying until April or preferably reconsidering implementation? If not, can I have a clear explanation of the assistance available for those on low incomes but above benefit levels or whose benefit won't cover the charges? No details of the support scheme have been forthcoming, and that is not acceptable. Patrick Harley has previously stated that charges would enable tenants to have pride in where they live. Can the lead member tell me whether he agrees with the leader and what we should say to those who will have to forego heating or eating to pay for these additional charges? I remind the lead member that being a tenant is not a choice. Tenants are not customers, as this council insists. And if they were, they would demand a refund and take their custom elsewhere. Will the lead member commit to ending this chaos? Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cowell. I think it's Councillor Bevan.
Councillor Cowell, what a surprise. I was appointed, Madam Mayor, to this role back in May, and I've tried to work with Councillor Cowell. I've encouraged her to come and speak to me outside of meetings, but she persists in raising matters such as this at full council, and that is her right. She talks about what was it you said? A messed up consultation exercise. It only started this week. If you wanted to speak to me after the meeting and clarify exactly what it is that is messed up about it, then please do. You don't have to bring it to a committee and raise it in this way. I'm sure we could achieve far more if we worked on this together. I will not delay the implementation of it. It will be implemented in January. Consultation is currently live. There are events planned across the borough. There are releases on the internet. The amount of posts that I've received about service charges suggests that tenants are aware of this. There is no reason to delay anything. And yes, I agree with the leader.
Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Councillor Cowell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can the lead member then apologise to tenants for the way they are being treated?
Councillor Bevan.
It's a bit difficult to apologise when you haven't said what you want me to apologise for. The way residents have been treated is just a sweeping wide statement. We are implementing service charges in our properties. It is the sensible thing to do. These services are not provided free of charge, and our neighbouring authorities are already doing that. It is a recommendation that we do so, and we would be foolhardy not to do that. Unless you can provide me with some reason to apologise, to even consider, I don't see how I can help, Madam Mayor.
Is Councillor Ed Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to the leader, Councillor Harley. Following the election of the new Labour government, it seems one of the first jobs of our Deputy Prime Minister was to write to this council and tell us that our housing targets would be increased by over 140%, putting our precious green belt and green spaces back under threat. I know that Councillor Harley responded to this in the strongest terms, and he informed government that this would mean Dudley losing the majority, if not all, of its green belt. Has Councillor Harley received a reply to that letter? And also, when it was a Conservative government in power, we stood up to them and we told them that our green belt was not going to be used to take the pressure off neighbouring authorities. What support has he had from the Labour members on this? As to me and many others, they've been very quiet on this topic. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, Councillor Harley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. They have been quiet. There will come a time, probably in the new year, where they will have to speak. They will have to make a choice. Councillor Lawrence is quite right. And you only have to look at the amendment on the next notice of motion. That amendment is utterly, I have to say, garbage. There is no grey belt in Dudley. Don't take my word for it. Speak to the chief planner, speak to his staff. There is no grey belt. Don't try to cloud the issue by saying we can build more properties on Greenbelt that isn't Greenbelt. It's Greenbelt or it's not. And if there was a degree in local plans and black country plans, I think I'd get a distinction because I've spent so much time on this issue this last 2 or 3 years. Now, I did upset a Tory West Midlands mayor, Tory council leaders in Walsall. I also upset Labour council leaders in Wolverhampton and Sandwell because I stood up for Dudley and its Greenbelt, beating King Swingford, Wallheath, Brierley Hill, Gornal with the Straits on neighbouring South Staffs, whether it was Hals Owens Greenbelt. I stood up for it and took us out the Black Country Plan. I had criticism from my own side at times, but I was right. And you think all those 20,000 signatures, petitions by the residents of this borough can be ignored by a wet behind the ears Deputy Prime Minister, 2 minutes in the job, saying increase your housing need by 700 a year to more than 1,600. That is shocking, Madam Mayor. If we gave up every blade of Greenbelt, we can't match those figures. So yes, you can remain quiet now, colleagues on the opposite side, but there's going to come a time where you're going to either have to join with us in fighting these ludicrous housing targets, or, as Councillor Priest said, much better than I am, you will fall at the next set of local elections, one by one by one. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lawrence, do you wish to say any more? Thank you. I now move on to Councillor Simon Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is to Councillor Asif Ahmed as Chair of the Regen and Environment and Regen Select Committee. And apologies, this is going to look organised. I genuinely, it isn't. I didn't know that question was about to be asked. But in your capacity as Chair of that committee, could you provide an assessment to the Council on your thoughts of how the new mandatory housing figures and the new draft MPPF will affect Dudley Council and our ongoing local plan process?
Councillor Ahmed.
Thank you very much. I think it's one of those situations, as the chair of the committee, I think it's very important that we all have the opportunity to research into this, have the relevant figures that we need. I'm more than happy to look into things of this nature. I never make a decision or give an opinion on something without full details and statistics. But if that's something which members of this council feel as though needs to come before the committee and be looked into properly, I very much welcome it. Absolutely fine. Thank you.
Councillor Phipps.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your response. And as somebody who also likes to try and be a details person, especially when it comes to planning, I can totally understand that response if you haven't had the chance to really review the proposed changes. I understand I'm a member of the executive and it's not necessarily for me to make formal requests to scrutiny committees for what they look at, but I do think it would be really helpful to try and establish a level of understanding across all members, and I think the scrutiny committee could be a very, very useful tool in that. So if agreeable with you and your select committee, if it could be something that could be assessed by the committee at some point in the future, I think it would really help the council as we move forward and as we try and make sure that we get a good local plan through that protects Greenbelt. Thank you.
Councillor Ahmed, you've got about 30 seconds.
Thank you very much for your comments. Again, we've got some quite meaty agendas ahead of us, as you all know, because of the financial circumstances, but I will do absolutely everything I can to slip that into one of the meetings so we can have a proper discussion. Thank you.
Allowed has now been reached for questions. It has expired. Any members indicating to ask a question can either send it in writing or raise the question at the next appropriate meeting. There is no urgent business, so that concludes what could have been a pretty ugly council meeting, but I think we did ourselves proud in the end. So this meeting is concluded.